Been a crucial couple of days in the Oscar Pistorius murder case, and now the father of his model girlfriend, who's dead, speaks out for the first time, saying the athlete will, quote, have to live with his conscience if he's lying about how he killed his daughter. Pistorius does admit to shooting 29-year-old Reva Steenkamp, but denies it was murder, saying he thought she was an intruder. Yesterday, a visibly distraught Pistorius was released out on bail, and he's still awaiting trial. He's at his uncle's house. Is a trial attorney, David Schwartz, a former prosecutor and also a defense attorney. And welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, this case, this bail hearing, David, had people transfixed on the screen, listening and watching. But we shouldn't read too much into it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this bail hearing just means, and his release on bail means he's not a flight risk. It's not a determination of guilt or innocence, correct?
I agree, Jamie, totally. This is not a trial. This is not an acquittal after trial. All the evidence hasn't been seen yet. And clearly, this is just a bail determination to see if the defendant will come back to court. That's all this is about. There's a big trial left to take place.
And Rachel, the law in that country compared to our country is very different. We've learned so much about the evidence in this case and also the botched evidence. The lead investigator left bullets behind. They've admitted to that, and he was removed from the case after the bail hearing because he himself is facing murder charges. The prosecutor, whether he knew about it or not, what's the effect of that on the credibility of this whole case?
Well, I think you've got a lot of problems going on here, but the lead prosecutor, the lead investigator who initially came onto the scene in a murder case like this, making so many mistakes, and it's something that the judge mentioned a lot in that bail hearing yesterday, which I was completely transfixed. I was on the edge of my seat for that full 2 hours watching the entire thing. I was fascinated.
Yeah, you know how many trials all of us have been handling or viewing, and to hear this judge so meticulously go through this. The forensics will play a huge role, David, and questions even like if she was in the bathroom and he thought she was an intruder, did she have her shoes on even though he says she was in bed with him initially, or did he put his prosthetic legs on or not? Was he dressed for bed or not? Will we ever hear those answers if the investigation was botched to the degree we've known already?
Yes, because I don't think the botch is fatal in this case, and I'll tell you why. This detective, because this case is a what happened case. It's not a whodunit case. We're not out there looking to see who the killer is. So the investigation in a what happened case is starting right now. We need to get the ballistics evidence in place, the forensics, the emails, what led up to this, was there a fight, the neighbors' testimonials. So there is so much investigation that's going to make or break this case from this point forward.
It has so many elements that are really fascinating. You're right, even for legal scholars, I'm sure. Rachel, premeditation. You know, we're taught in law school of a certain definition of premeditation, and I seem to recall that it can be on a moment's notice. And they're saying even if he took the time to put his prosthetic legs on when he thought there was an intruder, that could be enough to change this case and turn it into premeditation. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And the issue here, too, is just the common sense factors. The biggest problem I have with it, despite all the botches that the investigators made, which I think is going to assist in showing reasonable doubt, but we don't know what's going to come out in the future, and if they double check and continue with the investigation and find SMS messages or phone calls, or whether she had her shorts on, or whether she had makeup on, or whether she was dressed for bed, all of these things are going to come out eventually at the trial stage. But initially, you know, how much time it might have taken him to go from the balcony to the bed, get the gun, go in there, and just not even ask, who's there? Who's in there? Come out or I'm going to fire. I mean, there's some common sense stuff here that really hurts the defense of this case, I think.
One thing we always ask ourselves in these cases of murder, alleged murder in his case, but it is a murder trial, David, is whether or not the defendant will take the stand. We may never hear his story, the questions that Rachel's asking. And all that has to be raised there, as different as that system is reasonable doubt. Do you see reasonable doubt already?
Well, no, I don't actually, without the defendant taking the stand. I think this is one of those cases that screams out for the defendant to take the stands. You know what? You got to tell the trier of fact. Don't leave your common sense at the door. You have a guy, he takes out a 9mm gun, he walks up to the bathroom where his girlfriend is in, and he fires 4 shots, 3 shots hitting her. That shows intent to kill, and the only way for him to overcome that is to get his story out by testifying. Would not be surprised if he testified.
Rachel, if he were your client, would you advise him to, and keeping in mind that even if he does, the conviction rate there, so different than here, is 10% or less. So what would you advise him to do?
Well, I'm no expert in South African law, but I've been fascinating learning as much as I have the last few days. And I would advise him, yes, you have to tell your side of the story because it's a case of what is the story. And he's the only other one that knows truly what happened that night. And he's already told his story because he submitted a sworn affidavit for the purposes of the bail hearing. So we already know what his position is and what his story is. So he's not going to be damaged further by taking the stand, I don't believe.
Well, Rachel and David, emotions are running so high on both sides, both families, and we'll continue to watch the case. He's back at the beginning of June. Yeah. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice to see you.
Great to see you, too. Kelly.